Everyone. My name is Shireen Hill, and I wanted to talk to you about family violence. That is something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. So I wanted to come on and I did a presentation, and I just want to share with you the presentation, the information in the presentation, and all my work has been cited, although I'm not going to read the cites because it would be time consuming, of course, but the work has been cited. And so it is on YouTube and it's private. So if you want the link, where you can actually see the actual presentation, I'm more than happy to give you that link if you go ahead and put that in the comment on this video that you would like the link to view this video, this presentation. But I'm going to talk about the family violence. This presentation will discuss an overview of the types of family violence, the group that's involved in family violence, the historical background, and faith integration. Domestic and family violence in our community is real, and I want everyone to understand that family violence, domestic violence, child maltreatment is real in our community. And a lot of times we don't know that someone is suffering family violence or children are suffering maltreatment, and then we may know and we don't report it. So one of the things that I will be talking about under the human service professional is being a mandated reporter, and that you should be reporting a suspected reasonable suspicion of abuse if you see it, especially child abuse. And so therefore we will get into that. So this presentation can be used in various settings such as churches, schools, adult caretaker, and parenting classes, and training for educational and informational purposes. There are 4 different groups of people that can be affected by domestic violence and maltreatment. There's children, there's male, female, and elder. These are the types of domestic violence that I'm going to talk about. Family violence: physical abuse, the use of force, threats that results in injury, pain, or impairment, inappropriate use of drugs, restraint, or punishment, and force feeding. There is sexual abuse, includes rape and any other non-consensual sexual contact, nudity, exposure. And then there is emotional abuse, psychological abuse, verbal or nonverbal acts that results in anguish, pain, or other distress, includes insults, threats, humiliation, and harassment. And then there is neglect or maltreatment, which is refusal or failure to fulfill any part of a person's obligations or duties, such as necessities to food, water, clothing, shelter, personal hygiene, medicine, personal safety, and other essentials. And there's a little circle here where you have like coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, using children and pets, using privilege, economic abuse. And in the middle is power and control. So power and control can spit out all of those things that I just talked about. And one of the things about minimizing, if you don't understand, is that the aggressor or the perpetrator or abuser can minimize that person, make them feel like they're nothing, that they're small, that they're little, then they can deny all types of, things to the victim and blame them for their own aggressions and transgressions. And then you have child abuse and neglect. In 1912, the U.S. government established the Children's Bureau, but it was not until 1974 Americans passed their first major federal policy around child abuse and prevention and treatment act, called the CAPTA. The act provided the definition for child abuse and neglect. And then there's physical abuse. There are 5 types of physical abuse. And under that, you can look, I can tell you there's physical abuse like bruises, welts, punching, kicking, biting, shaking, throwing, stabbing, choking, hitting, lacerations, broken bones, burns, and shaken baby syndrome. That's all a form of physical abuse. Physical abuse is completely preventable, although not easy, but it's preventable. There's sexual abuse, is inappropriate touching, exposing a child to pornography, forcing a child to touch you, sexual molestation, or incest. It can also be defined as any act of occurring between 2 people at different developmental stages for sexual gratification. So usually one of the children is older than the other child. When there's there's two different age groups when it comes to when I say the developmental stages for sexual gratification. It may include oral, anal, genital penetration, or contact of touching intimate body parts. And I'm reminded of a video that I saw recently where this woman was dancing on a pole with her children in the background, and a lot of the comments were saying, well, as long as the children are happy, they look clean, and they're fed. That's one of the things that people need to understand, is that just because a child is clean and they're fed doesn't mean that they are not being subjected to sexual abuse. Because this is very, when you're talking about, it's not just about the child being clean and fed, but if they have been exposed to anything that can be misled or misconstrued, because the child may not know. So they may be smiling, but they may not know that they're being subjected or exposed to sexual abuse. Emotional, psychological abuse, scapegoating, rejection, exposure to violence, isolation, withholding affection, refuse to comfort child, belittling, ridiculing, humiliation. This type of abuse erodes a child's fragile sense of self, instills fear and inadequacy. And then neglect. Neglect refers to omission rather than commission and failure to provide necessary food or shelter or appropriate supervision, and failure to provide proper hygiene. So if they are not providing the necessary food, shelter, hygiene, but neglect is the most difficult types of abuse to confront and change. It is, because think about if you are a social worker and you're going out to a home to assess, because there's been calls and the family is on the radar, and you're going out to this home and the family has gotten word that social worker is going to show up, or they just suspect, or maybe someone in the system has alerted them. Guess what? They can easily clean up and feed the child and put clean clothes and have the house clean. But that doesn't mean that they're not really being neglected. So just because a child is smiling, they look clean, and they're fed, doesn't mean that they have not been exposed to sexual abuse, some type of sexual abuse, or being neglected in some kind of way. And then we want to talk about the intimate partner, the male intimate partner violence. The hidden side of domestic violence includes men. And that's one of the things, is that a lot of men, are pushed aside, and they're overlooked when it comes to intimate partner violence. Intimate partner abuse against men is a complex problem that affects people of all ages and both genders. Men are less likely than female victims to seek help or report incidents. And the reason why is because we're going to get to that. Men are as likely, or perhaps, to be assaulted with a weapon by a female partner. And the National Alcohol Survey reported male victims experience female partner throwing something, pushing, grabbing, shoving, slapping, kicking, biting, choking, burning, scalding, forcing sex, threatening with knife or gun. Men are more likely not to be believed. And that's one of the reasons why men do not report it. They are less likely to seek help, because they may not be believed. There's limited resources out there, or no male support services. So even if they were able to get to some limited resources as far as male domestic maltreatment or violence, there's limited support services for follow-up. Also, they have been degraded. Men are degraded when they report it, that they're nothing, that they're punks, or that they're sissies, or that they're not real men. If they, are being beat on and that they report it, they are not taken serious, and we're not aware of the hotline. And then men have said through research and statistics that the police were anti-helpful, like, brushed them off, or even accused them of being the aggressor instead of the woman, and didn't even arrest the woman. And there was clear evidence that this woman was being abusive to the male partner, but yet still they failed to address the abuse that was happening, that the male partner was subjected to, and they failed to address it. There's a lot of reasons why men, don't report their abuse. They're afraid that they may not have access to their children. There's financial situations. So as we move on, we will get into that. So the intimate partner violence for a female is considered the most prevalent type of violence in families. It devastates individuals, families, and communities. It can be defined as rape, hitting, punching, yelling, economic abuse, threats, emotional and psychological pain. Research suggests the cost of hospitalizations, emergency room visits, and doctor visits are summoned. The cost of IPV is close to $44 million annually. And then there's the risk factors associated with mental health are tremendous, likely to suffer major depression, PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, and suicidal ideations and or gestures. Abusers control victims' economic situations by preventing victims from using or accessing available resources. They include denying access to money, dictating use of transportation, putting the victim on allowance, and monitoring all money spent. Can you imagine that? Not being able to go somewhere when you need to, not being able to spend money, and if you do go to the grocery store, you're subjected to a scrutiny because you need to go get milk or eggs, and if there's children involved. And then you have elder abuse, and we don't want to forget this group of people. Our elders are precious. They have, they once were children before, and now they're elders. And so we don't want to forget this group of people. And if your parents are still alive, we have to take care of them. We have to make sure they're safe and that they're not being abused, and give them direction and guidance, even with these scam phone calls that come through. I've had conversations numerous with my mother over how to handle phone calls because there's scammers out here constantly asking for information, wanting to scam and trying to scam and get into access to their bank accounts and trying to transfer property, things like this, so we have to make sure that our parents are being taken care of and that we do check in with them and monitor what's going on and talk with them, about things that could happen to them that they could be subjected to. And then if you don't have parents that have passed on, bless their heart, God bless you, and may you continue to have peace through the loss of your elder parent. But elder abuse can be defined as physical abuse, the use of force or threats that can result in injury or pain, punishment, restraint, medical procedures without informed consent. So sometimes caretakers try to force, elders to go have medical procedures without even knowing why they're having it. Then you have the sexual abuse where they can be raped and any non-consensual sexual contact. And then there's the emotional or psychological abuse, verbal or nonverbal acts that results in mental anguish or pain, insults, threats, harassment, humiliating them. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Because they were once, a young person like you and I, and now they're elder and they need a little guidance and support and help to get through day to day. And then there's the neglect, refusal or failure to fulfill any part of a person's obligation or duties to an elder, abandonment. And you've heard the stories where some elders are abandoned. They've been stuck in the bed where they can't get up. They've been left in a wheelchair, or on the couch or in a chair where they can't get up. They haven't been fed. And then you have the financial elder abuse where there's the losses, where they're constantly losing money, jewelry, property transfers, taking money as financial gifts where they go into the bank and withdraw money and say it was a gift from their parent, their elder parent, which is illegal to do if the parent has not given them permission to do so, or improper use of the elders' funds where they're spending money on trips, buying property with their parents or elder parents' money, going all over the place, buying expensive shoes and purses and clothes and cars on this elders' fund that they've worked all their life for, or their property, or even their assets, just taking over their assets. But as a human service professional, there are reporting laws of family violence and neglect. Reporting suspected abuse may be what it takes to protect a child, and it may be what it takes to protect an elder as well. No indicators of child abuse. No indicators of elder abuse. Should or should you not report it? And whom should you report it to? Think about facts. Report what you heard and saw. Think about it from the individual perspective. Does the child need protecting? Does the elder need protecting? Be sensitive to what the children or the elder is saying. Be sensitive to that. Don't take the bias or stereotype, or the elder is senile or has dementia. Listen. Just listen to what they're saying. And and in the United States, you can either call the local police 911 or CPS, National Child Abuse Hotline, or the Elder Abuse Hotline. It's the Office of Aging, 1-800-4CHILD, or the Office of Aging, and they will direct you. As of today, in the United States, you can find more information and statistics at Child Welfare Information Gateway is www.childwelfare.gov. And then there's regulations, laws of reporting family violence and neglect. Mental state of mind required to the state of reporting duty must be reasonable suspicion, as I was saying earlier, reasonably suspected, or reasonable cause to suspect that there is some type of abuse going on or child abuse. Time frame reporting varies among states. We understand that in different states there's time frames for reporting, and it varies. And means of making a report, you can do it by phone, mail, fax, text, message, or you can do it online. In whatever state you're in, whatever their online website submission is. And then there's penalties for not reporting, include small fines to felony, include imprisonment. Fines vary by state, and in California, the fine is $1,000 currently. So if you are a mandated reporter, and there's a lot of mandated reporters, and you would know if you're a mandated reporter. So I'm not going to cite who the mandated reporters are, but you would know if you are. But guess what? As a mandated reporter, and you reasonably suspect, reasonable cause to suspect, or reasonable suspicion, you are required to report this. And a lot of times it's not reported, but we have to remember that just because we're not at work doesn't mean we cannot report it. If we see it happening next door to us, down the street, in the grocery store, somewhere, we need to be able, or any store, and you see some type of abuse, maltreatment that you suspect, again, reasonable suspicion, reasonably suspected, reasonable cause to suspect, it needs to be reported. You don't have to make a scene, but it should be reported. And again, and another thing, all states provide immunity, good faith, or the immunity clause exemption from legal proceedings. And then the ethics of a human service professional. Moral, ethical, and legal obligation to fulfill role as human service professional and in the best interest of the child, or even the elder. Must have sufficient training, keep abreast of laws, continuing education, need to know scope of their duty. We need to know the scope of our duty. We need to keep abreast. We need to keep going to training, ongoing training, promoting self-determination, honoring cultural diversity, being culturally competent, advocating for social justice, and acting with integrity, honesty, genuineness, and objectivity, being objective. And we need to make sure that we are documenting the truth, not making up reports, because I've heard before that you've heard where sometimes reports are screwed and the information is not in there correctly. So we need to make sure that we're being honest and acting with good integrity, having empathy, understanding that person's feelings, thoughts, and behaviors as if they were your own, assisting individuals, families, and communities in overcoming their problems and helping them improve their quality of life. And that's what we need to do, helping people cross the bridge, building bridges so that families can have a more normal, formalized life. Understanding the autonomy assumes that people have the right to decide how to live their own lives, as long as their actions do not interfere with others. So, they have a right to live their own life, make their own decision. We provide the resources, do the best we can to help them. But again, they have a right to live their own lives. And not always a victim will leave their perpetrator. Not always a victim will leave their abuser. And we have to understand that as human service professionals. But we do the best we can. And we need to take care of ourselves, because sometimes helping in this capacity can be stressful. And so we have to make sure we also take care of ourselves as well, so that we can be healthy to continue to help others. And having good work ethic of appearance, attendance, attitude, character, communication, cooperation, organizational skills, productivity, respect, and teamwork are essential for success. And these are ethics of a human service professional. And then I want to just provide some historical background for women, religious views, and abuse. In the United States, domestic violence against women has received a great deal of attention for years as an important social problem. It is a social problem. It's a social problem. Mothers are more than likely to abuse their children because they spend more time with the child. Female victims may stay in relationships based on their religion, tell the victim to stay with her husband. The church does not want to get involved. They blame the wife for the abuse. They may go as far as to tell the wife she is not submitting enough or to her husband and to try harder. And that's something that, some churches have told women that, and they don't want to get involved. But I think as faith integration, families come to the church for help and to seek services. And so therefore, we need to make sure that we are providing the resources and the material and information necessary to help these families. And I think it's important that in the educational aspect of things in the church, workshops, proper training, presentations, resources, information, not to diagnose, but to be able to refer them to the appropriate agencies for help, for assistance. And I think that's important because, again, families come to us asking for help and seeking services, and either we're not adequately trained or we don't want to get involved. But as clergies and pastors and leaders in the church, teachers, it's important to be able to reach these families and to try to help them. The church may view sexual assault as not considered sexual abuse or rape because it is the wife's responsibility to have sex with her husband and believes suffering is good and ensures a place in heaven. No woman should feel that they're not going to have a place in heaven because they have been abused by their spouse. A wife should be able to report the abuse and get the help that she needs. And it shouldn't be contingent upon ensuring a place in heaven. And according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 2011, the rates of substantiated physical maltreatment reported from CPS agencies revealed that physical maltreatment is the second most prevalent form of child maltreatment, second only to neglect cases. And men can be victims too. Women are not the only victims of domestic violence and abuse. Men also suffer from domestic abuse, especially verbal and emotional abuse, and may be even more ashamed to seek help. Men are more than likely to be assaulted with a weapon. Men stay with their abusers, because they have nowhere to go. They may stay for love. They may stay thinking that she will change. Financial constraints, and they may be denied access to their children and embarrassed of their abuse. Most victims know their abusers and are afraid to report it. It is usually a parent or family member that abuses the victim when it comes to children. And the reason why I put that piece in there about this part here, the reason why I put this in here, that it is usually a parent or family member that abuses the victim. And I put that in there for a reason, because mothers are more than likely to abuse their children because they spend more time with the child than the fathers. And usually the child knows who their abuser is, and it usually is a parent or family member. And then partner violence may be reciprocal and symmetrical, as can be as abusive towards their partners as men can. Strauss argues that many academics have deliberately concealed, denied, and distorted relevant evidence documenting females committing violence against their male partners. They're not reporting accurately. statistics don't always report the information accurately. And not just because um, it's not being reported, but because they don't report it accurately, because they don't want men to look like men. There's more abuse with men, when in fact, there is more cases of abuse against men, and women are the aggressor, but it's not being reported. And as you see right here, it's been concealed, denied, and distorted relevant evidence documenting when females commit violence against their male partners. And consent is always mandatory. The LGBT community and violence on college campuses. There are unique forms of maltreatment that occur in the LGBTQI relationship, such as threaten to out the victim to family, friends, colleagues, and or employers. Gender Violence Resource Access Survey, released in 1998 in Portland, Oregon by the Survivor Project, indicated that 50% of their transgendered and intersex have been raped or assaulted by a romantic partner. Lesbians are maltreated at higher rates than gay men, more physical violence, coercion, threats, shaming, and use of control of children, and can be treated indifferent by law enforcement. Make Peace conducted a study on physical IPV among college students and found 1 in 5 students on the campus experienced an act of physical IPV within the previous year. And then drugs and alcohol play a factor in college sexual assaults. Psychological maltreatment is the most understudied form of maltreatment within college student dating relationships. Various types of behaviors that attack a partner's self-worth, self-concept, controlling, coercing, denigrating, isolating, dominating, ridiculing, and using recurring criticism, threats, and verbal aggression. Sexual aggression is a problem among college students in dating relationships assessing both genders. Found that Hines and Saldino found that 29% of college men and 13.5% college women in dating relationships perpetrated sexual aggression. 24.5% of men and 24% of women were victimized by sexual aggression. And women can be sexual perpetrators also. Faith integration. The family is the most important commitment an individual can make. 1 Corinthians 7:3. When families attend church service, not only do they entrust in members of the church, but they trust their family and children will be safe and strengthened by the many activities in the church. Creating a safe environment is not only important for child abuse prevention, but also for welcoming families with young children into the church. And I have a book that was written by Harder, 2010, and it's called Let the Children Come. It's a very good book that you can use, to talk about family violence and to be able to incorporate that into your church educational plan. Always, I ask your pastor or director of Sunday school or education, in the church. But that is a very good book about Let the Children Come. And it's written by Harder, 2010. As human service professionals, there is an obligation to seek God's direction, assess the current situation, and do all we can to protect the children before anything happens. There should be safety measures in place to monitor safety policies and identify key personnel to make sure the child abuse policies are being followed. It takes teamwork, community resources, education, counseling, support services, training, and Christ in us to do the work to decrease family violence. Education must be provided in a way it is understood and accepted. Paul speaks of love, submission, obedience, servitude, rendering to the Lord, and consequences. And this is in Colossians 3:18 through 23, King James Version, regarding the Christian family. And I say, let the Lord lead so the family can follow, and he will do the rest. And then, conclusion. Family violence is a growing national crisis, but as faith communities, we have a lot to offer families in poverty. We need to partner with other professional organizations to end child abuse and neglect. No one entity can do it alone. We need to know we are not powerless. Children in our families and communities need us to hear and see them and to be their voice. Human service professionals help to provide hope and inspiration. They provide resources and give support to families, and in doing so, these actions can lead families to healing, restoration, and moving forward in unity and love for a healthier and better lifestyle. We are called to bring good news to the poor. Matthew writes, "The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them." Matthew 11, verse 5, King James Version. And the end. But I'm going to give you the references at the end of this presentation. Al Yukda, Maxwell Hill, Intimate Partner Violence in the African American Community, Risk Theory and Interventions, the Journal of Family Violence. And then there is J. Harder, 2010, the book I just spoke about, Let the Children Come, Preparing Faith Communities to End Child Abuse and Neglect, out of the Herald Press. And then there's M. Kinney, R. Abreu, C. Helpingstein, A. Lopez, and B. Matthews, 2018, Counselors' Mandated Responsibility, to report child maltreatment, a review of U.S. laws, Journal of Counseling and Development. And then there's J. Liu and J. Park, 2018, Bureaucratization, Professionalization, and Advocacy Engagement in Nonprofit Human Service Organization, Journal of Human Service Organizations, Management, Leadership, and Governance. And then S. L. Reed, The Four Categories of Elder Abuse, Evaluation Approaches, Psychiatric Times. And then there's K. Roberto, The Complexities of Elder Abuse, American Psychologist. And then there's A.M. Stylonu, Economic Abuse Experiences and Depressive Symptoms Among Victims of Intimate Partner Violence, the Journal of Family Violence. And then V. Su, Male Victims of Intimate Partners Abuse, Use and Helpfulness of Services, Social Work Services. So these are the references that I have used to put this presentation together. If there's any questions, like I said, once I post this, please comment, like, and share this video, because we never know who's suffering from family violence. And I just want to say that if you are suffering from family violence, there is information that I've provided to you. You can put that in the comment, or if you know of someone that is suffering family violence, please share this video with them. I want everyone to be safe. I want the children to be taken care of. Let the children come. I want the families to be restored to the way God has called us to be as families. God said to love one another, and we should do that wholeheartedly, is to love one another. And I know that it's not always easy when we're going through things, and we feel hurt by others. But again, God says to love. And so we have to love one another. And when it comes to children, we have to make sure that our children are safe and they're happy. And I hope that everyone is being safe and taking care of themselves. And so let me just say this. God bless you all, and thank you for listening and watching this video. Again, I pray for everyone's safety. God bless you all.